10.14 May and June by Ruth Rendell. Part 1.
Mr. and Mrs. Thrace called their daughters May and June because of the months when they were born. May was the oldest. She was changeable like the month, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, and neither pretty nor clever. June, however, was both, and her sunny personality brought her many admirers. When May was 20, she met a young lawyer called Walter. He was extremely good-looking, and his father was wealthy. May fell passionately in love with him. He asked her to marry him, and of course she accepted. During that time, May almost became beautiful, but the intensity of her passion frightened Mrs. Thrace. June was away from home studying to be a teacher when May and Walter got engaged, so Walter had never met her. But a month before the wedding, June came home for the summer holidays. It was all very unfortunate, Mrs. Thrace said over and over again. If Walter had left May for some unknown girl, they would have been furious. But what could they say or do when he had fallen in love with their younger daughter? May became violent and tried to attack June with a knife.
"We're all terribly sorry for you, darling,"
said Mrs. Thrace.
"I shall never marry now,"
said May.
"She's ruined my life. She stole my husband."
"He wasn't your husband, May,"
her mother replied. When June and Walter came to visit, May always went out, but she knew about them because she always read June's letters to her mother. She knew that they had a big house, that they collected furniture and pictures, and that they didn't have any children. She knew where they went for their holidays and who their friends were. But she could never discover if Walter loved June or not. She thought that perhaps he was sorry that he had married June and not her. This thought was the only thing that comforted her.
Part 2.
May never married, and she continued to live at home for over 30 years until her parents died. Mrs. Thrace died in March, and her husband 6 months later. At her father's funeral, May saw Walter and June again. Walter was still good-looking, and May wanted to die when she saw him.
"Please come and speak to your sister,"
he said to her. But May refused. It was only at another funeral that they were reconciled. May learnt of Walter's death from the newspaper, and the pain was as great as when her mother had told her that Walter wanted to marry June. Inside the church, her sister came up to May and asked her to forget about the past.
"Now you know what it's like to lose him,"
May said. 2 days later, May got a letter from June. June asked her to come and live with her now that they were both alone.
"Now that you've retired and haven't got very much money, I'd like to share my beautiful house with you,"
she wrote.
"Perhaps this way I can give you something in return for what I took away from you."
May decided to accept. She thought it was right. During their first evening together, she asked June to talk about her marriage, about her life with Walter. But June didn't want to talk. May looked in the house for letters or presents from Walter, jewellery or pictures. She couldn't find anything. Even June's wedding ring wasn't as beautiful as the engagement ring Walter had given May all those years ago.
He never really loved her,
she thought.
All these years he loved me.
She decided to start wearing her engagement ring again, on her little finger, which was the only one it now fitted.
(10.16) Part 3.
May never cried now, though June did.
I'm an old fool. I can't help it. You're strong, May, but I'm weak. And I miss Walter so.
I missed him too,
said May.
He was always fond of you,
said June.
He often talked about you. You have forgiven me, haven't you, May?
As a matter of fact, I have,
said May.
I think you've been punished for what you did. It was a marriage without love,
she thought.
Walter probably talked constantly about me.
For the first time in 40 years, she was happy. One night, May woke up and heard a noise.
A burglar,
she thought. She put on her dressing gown and went to June's room. The bed was empty. She looked out of the window and saw a car parked outside the house and a light in the living room window. Then she heard a cry and saw a man running out of the house, covered in blood. He got into the car and drove away. May went into the living room. June was standing next to her desk. This was a desk which she always kept locked, so May had never been able to see what was in it. The desk was open now, and the contents were all over the room. There was broken glass on the floor, and a gun. May went up to her.
Are you all right?
Yes, I'm fine. I threw a bottle at him and he ran away. He pointed a gun at me, but I wasn't afraid. He only took a few pieces of silver. He heard you coming and he panicked.
Suddenly, May saw a letter which was open in the desk. It was a letter to June from Walter, the last one he wrote to her when he was dying.
My darling love, I want to tell you how happy I have been all these years with you. If I die, I want you to know that you are the only woman I have ever loved.
Could you call the police, please, May?
Asked June.
Yes,
said May. She picked up the gun. The police arrived 15 minutes later. They brought a doctor with them. But June was already dead.
Don't worry, Miss Thrace. We'll catch the person who did this,
said the inspector.
But it's a pity you touched the gun. I suppose you weren't thinking.
That's right,
said May.
It was the shock. I've never had a shock like that. Not since I was a girl.